Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, together with my co-host Mark Ronich of Statewide News Service, jnewstechphilly.com, and as you can see here, weekly columnist for the Jewish press.
Yeah, I'm having fun doing all of that, and I talk about how government relates to the Jewish community, or doesn't, as the case may be. But one person who really relates to the Jewish community is our guest today, Assemblyman Walter Mosley. Welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you for having me again, Mark.
Yeah,
Rabbi.
Welcome back, I should say. What's new in your world?
Well, we're getting down towards the last days of session,
Right.
and we're just winding down, and we got some pressing and outstanding issues we have to resolve. And
Whining or winding?
windings depends on who you ask.
Whining.
Exactly, depends on who you ask. You might ask some of my colleagues on the other side; they might say whining, but for us in the conference, we're winding it down as we prepare to end session and head back to our respective districts.
Okay, so one of the issues that has been languishing in the Assembly is this boycott, divestment, and sanctions bill that it's sort of a counterattack of of groups who want to harm Israel through economic sanctions.
Correct.
And then we're counterattacking by saying, well, if you harm Israel, we're going to harm you.
Correct.
And
correct.
we're not going to give you business.
But the governor gave an executive order against this.
Correct.
Not the Assembly, but the governor.
But in the Assembly, there's a bill that's languishing in the Government Operations Committee.
Correct. And that's the reason why the governor signed off on Executive Order 157, understanding that the legislative process can be an arduous process and it can be something that can linger on for years and for multiple sessions. It's our duties as members of the legislature as well as the executive to look at sometimes legislation that needs to be taken care of immediately in real time, and that's where we're proud to see the governor sign this executive order. And again, this, like it says, it counters what is being exercised and put out on a national scale, both internationally as well, in terms of boycotting and divesting and sanctioning Israel. That if you want to continue to do business with the state of New York, we do not expect you to be harming one of our closest allies, our closest ally in the region, and one of our closest allies throughout the globe. So we're proud of this executive order, and we're looking forward to making sure that our relationship is unbound, and that those who look outside from inside see that Israel and the United States will always remain strong allies.
Now, this comes on the heels of Yom Yerushalayim celebration, and the governor could have been the first in the country to have this executive order at any time, but he chooses certain holidays or certain celebrations to make these declarations. So, for example, during let's say a gay rights parade, he might have an executive order or sign a bill
Correct.
that has to deal with the gay community, or he may have something to do with the Irish community or Italian community, or Chinese New Year. He will sign something that allows for certain holidays off on Chinese
Right.
New Year, recognizing something.
Right.
So, is that appropriate, or could he have done this at any time?
Well, I believe that last year I introduced the resolution on the floor of the Assembly. This year we introduced the legislation. So I think he wanted to give us due respect in regards to seeing if we could do what the Senate was able to do in terms of passing this piece of legislation through and getting it on the floor for a vote and being voted upon on the positive side. We got caught up in some delays in our House, but we're proud of the governor for what he was able to do on the 68th anniversary of Israel. I think it was the most appropriate time to sign this executive order.
You talk about I don't know if this is the word anti-Semitism, but and of course you're a prominent Democrat, of course, in New York. But, even the Democratic Convention, there's problems there too. I mean, we consider them problems because they're bringing, pro-Palestinians and anti-Israel people as head of the Democratic Convention.
Correct. Well, I speak to a lot of my colleagues who, and I say colleagues, the people who work in government directly and indirectly, and as well as on the political side. And one of the things that we are concerned about is the platform committee, where Bernie Sanders has 5 appointments. 3 of those appointments could be considered people who might not be so pro-Israel. Some of them might be considered anti-Israel in terms of their positions they've taken in the past in terms of supporting the BDS movement.
And that's interesting because Sanders is Jewish.
Correct. And we're quite concerned because the platform committee is only made up of 15 people. He has 5. Secretary Clinton has 6 appointments, and the Democratic Party has 4. And for us, we believe that we don't want that to be the end-all and be-all to our platform, but at the same time, we understand that this has ramifications beyond the conference and beyond the November general election for the President of the United States, that this could have international impacts in terms of our relationships with Israel going forward, as well as our relationships with others in the region, and seeing whether or not, testing us to see whether or not our relationship is as strong as we claim it to be.
So let me ask you about this, about the timing of this. Did you think the governor did this to tie it in with the presidential convention?
Well, I think
a particular year.
I think you've noted in earlier when you said that we're the first state to sign into an executive order this anti-BDS provision. I don't think that he meant it to be something political, but anything that you do when it deals with international diplomacy and relationships, there's always going to be some type of political ramification behind it.
Do you believe that the Assembly will have this image by not passing this session? It might pass this session, but miracles
Would it
have
make a
happened.
difference if
But-
it does? That's what I mean, political matter.
Because then it's law, it's not executive order, because
Right.
another governor could then overturn the.
Correct.
The executive order is not forever. But does it give the Assembly the image that it's not as supportive of Israel as the Senate or as it could be as a body?
Well, I think what it does.
And who could be against it, and what would be the
Well,
arguments
well,
against it?
I'm gonna
Yeah,
ask-
Sure, it's a lot of questions.
I do believe that it's something that we as an assembly, because we are far more diverse in our conference, that there are individuals who need to be caught up on the history behind this movement. It's not something that just started in 2005. These are philosophies and positions that people have taken against Israel since the 1930s, and then obviously before that, from a biblical standpoint. So I think it's one of those things where, one, we're dealing with a presidential campaign where the BDS movement, unfortunately, is involved in, in the process, whether we like it or not. They have infiltrated certain groups that are pro Bernie Sanders. So we have to take into account that we have to really educate our conference. There are members who have been in the conference for a multitude of decades, many years. That doesn't mean that we can't take for granted that they need to be educated on this issue, be kept abreast, be briefed on issues on a real-time basis. So I think that it's far more complicated than when you're talking about maybe a more homogeneous Senate Republican conference that probably can pass something a lot further, a lot quicker than we can because of our diversity and because of the multitude of backgrounds and positions people take. So
Maybe you have too many Democrats in the conference, and you need to have fewer, and then you can get things done.
Oh, we don't want fewer, but we do understand that our task might be a little bit more arduous and a little bit more difficult. But it doesn't mean it's not insurmountable.
But when it comes up in conference, are there people who actually stand up and announce that they don't want this passed, or do they just say, "Oh, I need more time to think about it"?
There's more people who just need more time to think about it. I've had members come to me personally, privately, say, "Can you educate me on this whole BDS, anti-BDS movement?"
Isn't that a shame?
Oh, no,
That's such a
I
shame,
think the
because
shameful thing would be if people did not
online,
ask
you
the
can
question.
But you can
Yeah, I
go
understand.
online, you can easily get up to speed on this. I mean, there's no,
People want to know a direct thing. Give me in 1 minute,
Right.
Yeah, and that-
you're a friend, you're the Crown Heights representative,
Right.
so they know that you're the man on the spot. I mean, I understand how people are.
but
let-
Wikipedia has a very short, brief synopsis, and it's all cited with other articles, and they condense it. And, they did a good job with the BDS.
Well, I understand where you're coming from, Mark, but I also think that, sometimes members of the conference, particularly members of color, want to come to a colleague of theirs who they know is really out there and really pro-Israel and anti-BDS, and they want to hear it from me.
Sure.
I guess maybe just to reaffirm what they can, brief themselves
I think
on
the fact that
online
you
and so
sponsored
forth.
the
and so
bill
on.
has enough.
Well, the resolution.
The resolution.
yeah.
And then who sponsors?
There's two bills.
There's
One is by
Simber-
Helene Weinstein, and
Right.
then the other one's by Chuck Levine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Steve Simbrowitz has been a big,
Yes.
outspoken about
Very
this
much so.
also,
Very
yeah.
much so.
I wanted to ask, we're talking about the world, and of course, we have to focus in on New York, and number two, your area is Crown Heights. So
Correct.
maybe of course, Crown Heights is important to the Chabad
Yes.
area because the Lubavitch headquarters at 770 Eastern Parkway. So like I say, you represent the whole Lubavitch community in one sense. But what's new in Crown Heights?
Well, I think what's
happening on the home
new,
front?
what's new, but it's unfortunately it's really not new. Is our housing crisis. We have young families, old families, who are unable to find sensible places to live, to raise their families, moving to Sutherland County, Rockland County.
Albany County, maybe?
Albany County,
You're
but
gonna
many of them
encourage them to live up here.
many of them are living in they don't want to live too far
Yeah.
from New York, but yet far enough where they can find a decent place to live and raise their families. They're
I'm
growing
pushing Albany
and they're growing
County.
families, but that's a concern that's universal throughout New York City and particularly throughout Central Brooklyn, which I represent.
Yeah.
So we're doing everything that we can to work with our developers. We're pushing the governor to get this new tax abatement program up and running. We know we have some issues that are stalling that process up, and once we get that done, the governor will introduce his new housing initiative, and I'm working with the comptroller of the city of New York in terms of creating a land bank. We have so many lots of that's throughout the city that are owned by the city, but yet they're not being made accessible through program. So we're
What does
looking.
the city use with them? Like, for example, just empty
They've-
lots?
No,
or-
they're empty lots, and we're
Yeah,
going to
no,
be
you see a
we're
lot
looking
of
to provide, take advantage of the situation of working with the city comptroller and working with the governor.
But there are developers who could buy that land from the city.
But the city has failed to put those properties out for sale,
For sale.
for bid.
People would grab them up, I'm sure.
Yeah, so we want to do the responsible thing, and I think that the 80-20 ratio is clearly not the way to go about dealing with our adverse housing issue that we
What
have.
would be the 80-20? I don't
Well,
know
that's what the ratio was when we had the 421A tax abatement. That you have 80% market, 20% below market. But again, when you're talking about housing and you put housing in the sense of a lottery, that's not how you plan for a family. That's not how you build a future.
Right, that's flipping a coin.
You hope to get, you put in your application, you hope to get into this particular building, you hope to land this particular apartment. That's not how we're supposed to raise a family and deal and treat our working class men and women throughout our city, regardless of their religious affiliation. I think that's a poor way to plan. It's a poor way to treat people.
So, and what's going on with Medgar Evers College? There was some new things that were going on. What's the latest?
Well, I know Medgar is looking to develop property in their district in terms of creating some affordable housing, but I also know that they want to be a part of a real partner in regards to the redevelopment of the Bedford Union Armory, which is ongoing. And right now we're trying to negotiate with the developers so we can continue to have our Satmar celebrations there within this next calendar year, and then plan from there in terms of once they start developing the project, find alternative places to have
Yeah,
these.
because the Lubavitcher shluchim from all over the world, the emissaries,
Yes.
actually meet there at the armory.
Exactly.
So they're going to.
So we're
take that
actually in
up, or-
negotiations with the EDC, which is the governing agency for the city that's overseeing this project, as well as with the developer, Slate Development, and Don Kaposha and David Swartz, in an effort to, do the right thing. And if they're not going to be breaking ground within the year, that we can hopefully have the celebration next year in the same place and location.
And I wanted to ask you, the governor's
Carrie
council-
Gabay, yes.
Carrie Gabay.
Yes.
Was that in your district?
Yes, he was unfortunately shot and killed
What
right
was that?
by.
Tell us about
He's
it.
going to tell you.
Yeah.
Right by Ebbets Field. Mr. Gabay was a senior official, a counselor to the governor. Last year, he was unfortunately killed by gunfire. And again, this
Intentionally, or was it?
no unintentional. He's a Harvard-trained lawyer.
3 in the morning.
Well, it was also during the time in which you were celebrating Juve, which is the precursor to the West Indian Day Parade. So there's a lot of people on the streets coming and going.
But nothing good happens after 2 in the
But
morning.
you know, but I can't
And-
blame somebody for not doing anything unlawful. You know, and they're trying.
But was he there to be a part of the celebration?
He was a part of the celebration. He was leaving.
So he was just having a cultural experience.
Cultural experience, and you know, today is, you know, this month is Gun Violence Awareness Month, and you know, we're trying to, you know, we're fortunate that we were able to bring the alleged assailant into custody most recently, and I'm looking forward to his prosecution. But again, there's too many people. I was talking to a rabbi the other day from the Crown Heights Jewish Community Council, talking about gunshots they heard, and thank God nobody was hurt. But that's not the type of environment you want to live in, where you know, gunshots become almost a customary sound, as if you hear children
or
playing.
Or backfire of a car.
You know, so you know, regardless of what a person is doing or not doing, gun violence is you know, something that we all have to kind of, you know, take an active voice in, and making sure that we kind of diminish its proliferation that we see throughout the city and state.
No, absolutely. I'm just, I just saw that and I'm like, just don't. What I mean,
It's
people
a part
know about the hour.
Yeah, but it's a part of the culture celebration.
And most
you know?
people don't understand that. I'll bet.
Well,
you know, and it just it hasn't been explained enough, and that's what I'm, you know, thinking. All right, you've risen up a bit in the ranks in the assembly.
Well, more seniority.
Yeah, well, there's so many people leaving, and you got a lot of new faces in the assembly. You're now chair of the subcommittee on regulated mortgage lenders.
Correct.
Now, what about the unregulated mortgage?
Well,
you have a subcommittee for that?
No, there's no subcommittee for that. You know, one of our main concerns is individuals through predatory practices, obviously foreclosing on individuals, as well as those who are continuously looking at deeds and seeing whether deeds are active or not, and taking whatever measures they can to subjugate those deeds through any scrupulous activities in an effort to gain unlawfully the possession of someone's home, which we see all throughout this city.
So how many people are on the subcommittee?
Right now it's 3 people, I believe. It's a subcommittee that's a part of Banking and Housing Committee. So it's a subcommittee of 2 overarching.
Standing committees.
Standing committees, correct.
So did you make any progress this session?
We're introducing legislation dealing with this particular practice. There's actually 4 pieces of legislation. I think Helene Weinstein is kind of heading up that charge, and she assigned me to one of the pieces of legislation dealing with anti-predatory measures when it comes to foreclosures.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And what do you have to say about, you have a bill that relates to reporting of gratuities, and it's Bill 2198?
That's a very old bill.
That's an old bill?
Yes.
Because it's still in, so what's that about? I mean, because I know that there are some restaurants that are saying, we don't want you tipping, we will build it into the price.
This was something that came before the increase of the minimum wage. So it's kind of obsolete, the bill.
It is?
It probably won't be reintroduced. Bills every 2 years, so it probably won't be reintroduced, but it was really in relationship to those who garner their wages primarily through tips. And ensuring that they were not taken advantage of, or their wages were not being subjugated to activities that were unlawful.
I knew there was something about Medgar Evers College. You're sponsoring a bill that's citing of the New York State Martin Luther King Jr. Institute for Nonviolence. So is that coming along? Is that bill, I mean, that seems non-controversial.
It's a non-controversial bill. It's something that we wish to commission and be a part of, and hopefully we'll go forward with that. But you know, Medgar just had the appointment of a new mayor, a new president, I should say, and Dr. Crew. That's something that will...
former education,
correct.
City education.
Correct. So we'll probably revisit this probably sometime next year, when the docket is maybe not as hectic and this calendar is not as,
Okay. So we may have an Institute for Nonviolence at Medgar Evers, which might tie in with Carrie Gabay.
Correct. And we will continue to...
And if you do that, you're guaranteed the governor will sign the bill.
Well, we'll continue to do what we need to do when it comes to anti-violence measures. You know,
Well, how is the crime rate in New York once you
Well,
leave to
people will report that and track that that crime statistically, particularly violent crime, is down. But when you see on the news when a 16-year-old is shot by a 24-year-old using a semi-automatic weapon, when you see young people who are being injured or maimed by gunshots, you can't but say
One is too many.
whether or not that crime is down, and particularly violent crime is down. But like you said, Rabbi, one victim is way too many.
And you have a bill here that increases the types of firearms that are to be included in the firearm ballistic identification database.
Correct.
Does that include, that sort of dovetails with what you were just saying about nonviolence?
Well, I just came back from the NRA conference not too long ago.
you went to it?
Yeah. And
Why did you go?
Well, one,
To see what the other side is.
Yeah, to see what the other side is saying, and then two, I was invited by Moms Demand Action, which is a group that came out of the Sandy Hook massacre, and to speak at a couple of panels. There were a couple of anti-NRA documentaries that came out, so I was asked to speak on those. And then I'm also a member of the NRA, and I get their information, I get their publications to see what they're talking about.
Do you own a gun?
No, I don't.
But you joined the NRA just to get their material?
Correct.
You don't-
It's a very nominal fee. It's like $30 a year, so I don't think they're going to make.
You don't feel it's making a difference?
No. The people who make the difference for the NRA are the manufacturing companies.
Did you join the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association?
The New York State, no. That's joined the national NRA. group.
Because the State Rifle and Pistol Association could really, have more impact on state legislation than the NRA.
Well, I think from a state perspective, I think we've done a lot, comparatively speaking, to other states in regard to SAFE Act and amending the SAFE Act. And I think we have put in the proper measures where I think if you look at New York State, comparatively speaking, as it relates to mass shootings and the like, we don't, have those acts. But when you put all together all the shootings, throughout our state, you can probably say that we've had one big mass shooting, given all the individuals throughout New York State who get hurt and maimed or killed. But at the same time, we also understand that we can't continue to think that, what we do in New York State is just the end all, the be all. What happens at the federal level, for instance, as it relates to funding that doesn't get to the ATF, funding that doesn't get to the CDC, funding that does not allow for us to computerize our data bank in terms of registered guns, which allows individuals to skirt the 3-day background check because it just takes too long to manually check upon the registration of a gun or someone's background. So these are issues that we have to remain cognizant of and put at our forefront.
Switching topics for a minute, how many years did you overlap with Shelley Silver being the speaker?
I believe 2 years.
Just 2 years. Okay, so you didn't really know him too well, did you?
As a staffer, I knew of him, and but not really.
Not really. Okay, because I just want to let you know, not that you would respond to it because you didn't know him very well, but Preet Bharara came up to Albany, and the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District who convicted him. He came up to Albany and said the rank and file members of the Assembly had to know what was going on, and they're the enablers to allow what happened happen. Now, just generally speaking, do you take offense to something like that on your colleagues, or do you? Is this something that you just?
No, to me personally, I don't take offense to it because he's not talking about me.
Right.
But at the same time, you understand where he's coming from, but to paint a wide brush over all members, right. I think is a little bit unfair and a little bit presumptuous.
Okay, so I want to let everyone, you're a member of the Correction Committee, Education Committee, Banks Committee, Codes Committee, Housing Committee, you're a member of the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus, and you're a member of the Puerto Rican Hispanic Task Force.
As well as the Environmental Caucus, as well as the state legislators against illegal guns.
All right, you're not on part of the Women's Caucus, so that's...
Not that I last checked,
You know, one of the
But are you an
issues,
associate member of the Jewish Legislators Association?
Some would say I am.
Some would say you are, but why don't you list that?
Well, I'm not officially. You have to officially apply for it, and they have
Okay.
to. So
You should
I'm
apply
sure
for
one
it.
day I'll get
you know,
there.
what about
Okay.
the education tax credit? That's an important issue that's coming up. I don't know if it's going to pass.
Well, it's not something that has been pressed by either side this year. I think that everybody understands that we were able to take care of some things from a statewide perspective within the budget. But I do believe, and I was talking to some advocates, union advocates last week. I said, look, we have to get to a solution. You know, for us to continue to be here, you saying no, no, no. Well, what about the millions of kids who, if they weren't being taught in the synagogues and weren't being taught in our charter schools and private schools, would you be able to take upon that task of educating them?
Right.
No. So, but at the same time, those kids should not have to suffer. Those families should not have to suffer because of the choices they made in terms of what type of educational experience they want for their child. So we have to come to a solution. We cannot continue. You know, a gentleman once told me that a wise man never says all or nothing. Mm-hmm. You know, it's never all or nothing, and that's where the argument has gotten to. And to me, I think that we have to find a solution to this. It's not going to go away. Right. It's only going to get worse. And the people who pay most are our youngest constituents, our children.
Excellent. All right.
What do you see as how do you sum up this legislative session? Was it productive? Was it?
I think we had one of the most progressive budgets in some time. I think that in and of itself was a major victory. You know, we as legislators divide the session into two seasons: a budget session and post-budget session. I think we had some great accomplishments in terms of our education, zeroing out GEA. Dealing with the My Brother's Keepers initiative, and a whole host of other things that people in the past might not have, you know, probably given that attention to. So I think from a budgetary standpoint, we have one of the most progressive budgets to ever pass in the New York State legislative history. Post-budget, you know, again, a lot of it has to do with politics because people are going in trying to get reelected. People are trying to preserve their status within the majority conference that they have currently. So, you know, depending on what you ask me 2 weeks from now, when we're done with session, I'll let you know if it's been a successful session or not.
Well, but in your view, I mean, have there been more bills, more two-house bills debated than usual?
No, I think this
only one, because I noticed that a lot of the one-house bills come up in the governor's State of the State message, and he grabs hold of the issues that don't get passed, and he says, I'm going to make a big deal about this year, you know.
Well, you know, fortunately, we don't gauge our success by what the State of the State, or what is said at the State of the State, because most of this, what's said at the State of the State finds itself on the cutting room floor when it gets to us. You know, we're still pending the second half of the session in terms of whether or not there's a success legislatively.
Now, just briefly, you visited Israel recently?
Correct.
Was it this year or last year?
Late last year.
Late last year, like November, December or
Correct.
something? And what was that experience like?
It was a tremendous experience. We went through...
Obviously, it wasn't your first time.
It was my first time.
It was
my first time. Went through APAC, and they showed us through their educational institute. It was an eye-opening experience, something I'm looking forward to going back sometime this year.
Okay.
And, you know, looking forward to taking advantage of the opportunities, you know, the relationships you build, and you're introduced to people and you just want to build on those relationships. But it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
If you want an assistant to go along with you this year, I'll be there for you. I haven't been to Israel, so if you can squeeze me in your luggage, I'll be happy to go with you.
I'll try.
So what, is there anything that we didn't ask you that you wanted to bring up that we didn't know enough to?
Well, you know, to me, what's important for my district is that they have a representative who understands the issues that are germane to their particular communities, their particular neighborhoods, their particular blocks. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to be on your show, to really espouse upon those concerns and that are germane to the district, but also germane to one's community. And
Well, you're one of the most well-spoken members in the State Assembly, and it's an honor to have you here.
thank you. I appreciate it, Mark.
I really haven't seen too many people who can articulate an issue as well as you could do.
I appreciate it. Thank you,
Assemblyman
Mark.
Mosley, thank you
you,
again for
Rabbi.
being a repeat. We'll have to call on you again next year to see what the Assembly's
I
up
hope-
to, but in the meantime, do everything with success and with good health.
Thank you. Thank you so much.